Bill Johnston, a former federal prosecutor and co-host of the True Crime Reporter podcast, joins me now. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
So this little girl just appears to have vanished into thin air. She was reportedly gardening with her family outside. What stands out to you about the Summer Wells case?
Well, I guess to begin with, any time there's a case of this nature, it turns out in the end that the vast majority are committed by someone they knew, whether it's a family member or someone else, someone that knew them. It's very rare that a stranger abduction or a stranger incident like this take place. It does take place. And I've had several I've worked on that it's been the case. But I see this as a bit of a, for lack of a better term, a country John Benet Ramsey case where the families made statements, perhaps some inconsistent statements, depending on what you read and who you believe. But at this point, there's not enough evidence, apparently, for law enforcement to either show those statements are true, the family's being truthful, or the family's not being truthful, or that any other person they've spoken with has been truthful or not. In John Benet Ramsey's case, he just didn't have enough evidence to link an individual to the homicide. And in this case, we don't have the little girl yet. And so it's a lack of evidence that makes it hard to contradict or corroborate statements. And so far, I think that's the main thing.
And I was reading about this case. It's really interesting. This reignited the search for her aunt, Rosemarie Bly, who also vanished from Polk County in 2009. That's a pretty big coincidence on its face.
That's odd. It may be a coincidence, but things of that nature that happen within families, sometimes there's a reason to look a little deeper. And I think in this case, if I'm reading correctly, the other children, that is to say her brothers, may have been taken from the home by Child Protective Services. I've read that. If that's true, there's something more to it that we're not hearing yet. And that's something that law enforcement will have to work through. And I'm sure they are. And I'm sure there's much we don't know at this point.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, too. The only clue, as we just heard from that reporter, in her disappearance so far seems to be that red pickup truck. The whole community has been searching. It seems like they would have found something by now. We heard from that law enforcement officer saying usually we get some sort of credible clue or tip at this point in the investigation.
Well, unless it didn't happen the way their whole basis for what they're doing is based on what, I guess, the family and maybe some others told them. So if that turns out to be mistaken in terms of its time or not correct, it may be that we had a case where a preacher in Texas murdered his wife and faked it as a suicide. And the time frame he gave, which law enforcement relied upon, they just fully relied upon it for the longest time until they realized he was lying about all of it. And his alibi was completely impossible forensically. And so the foundation of what we start with in a case like this sometimes is a myth. It may not be. It may be exactly correct. But if it's a myth, then everything that works from there could be mistaken. We just don't know enough.
Okay, Bill Johnston, thank you for joining us, host of the
You're
True
welcome.
Crime Reporter podcast. We appreciate your time tonight.
You're welcome.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.